When a $10 million Cartier watch vanished from a locked vault, the evidence pointed to one obvious suspect. The housekeeper was arrested, her life torn apart. But in a sunlit hallway, a billionaire knelt down to ask a question of the only other witness, a toddler in a yellow dress, and her answer would unravel the perfect case and expose a truth no adult was willing to see. This is the story of Alastair Vance, a reclusive tech billionaire, Maria Flores, the housekeeper fighting to clear her name, and a 2-year-old girl named Chloe. It's a case that exposes how quickly we blame the most vulnerable and asks a terrifying question. When every piece of evidence points one way, do we have the courage to believe a child who points another? The police were certain. The evidence was damning. But in a quiet moment, away from the detectives and the accusations, Vance would make a choice that changed everything. He would get down on one knee, look into a little girl's eyes, and ask, who took it? To understand why Maria Flores was the perfect suspect, you have to understand the house she worked in. The Vance estate wasn't a home. It was a $42 million fortress of glass, steel, and silence. Alastair Vance lived on the top floor, in a penthouse suite that required a private elevator code to access. His collection of rare timepieces, worth over $80 million, was kept in a vault on the main floor. A vault with a biometric lock, motion sensors, and a log that recorded every single entry. Maria cleaned the main floor. She had been doing it for 2 years and 11 months. She arrived every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:15 in the morning. She used a keypad code to enter through the service entrance. Her first task was always the kitchen. Her last task was always vacuuming the grand foyer. She never went up to the penthouse. She never touched the vault. Those were the rules. They were printed on a sheet given to her by the estate manager on her first day. Rule number 4, do not interact with Mr. Vance unless directly addressed. Rule number 7, the collection room is off-limits for cleaning. Security handles that. Maria followed the rules. She was thorough, quiet, and invisible. She needed the job. It paid $28 an hour, nearly double what other cleaning jobs in the city paid. The money was for Chloe, for preschool, for the 2-bedroom apartment with the small balcony where they could see a sliver of the park. For the future she was building alone, because Chloe's father had left when she was 4 months old, leaving behind a note and 6 months of unpaid rent. On the morning it happened, a Tuesday in October, Maria's babysitter cancelled. Again, it was the 4th time in 2 months. Maria had no family in the city. She had no backup, so she did what she had done 3 times before. She bundled Chloe into her winter coat, packed a bag of snacks and quiet toys, and brought her to work. She would keep her in the staff break room, a small windowless space with a table and an old couch. It was against the rules. She knew it was against the rules. But missing a shift was not an option. The margin for error in her life was measured in dollars, and she was already at the edge. She signed in at the security terminal at 7:14, 1 minute early. The log recorded it. She entered her code. The log recorded it. She brought Chloe inside. The security camera in the service hallway captured it. A 2-year-old in a yellow dress, clutching a stuffed fox, trailing behind her mother. This detail would become central to the prosecution's case, the unauthorized entry. Alastair Vance was already awake. He had been awake since 4. He suffered from insomnia, a condition that had worsened in the 3 years since he sold his company for $2.4 billion. He sat in his pent study, a room of floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights dim as the sun rose. He drank black coffee from a ceramic cup made by an artist whose name he could never remember. He was waiting for a call from Zurich. The Cartier watch, a one-of-a-kind piece from 1923, was the final item for his collection. It was being delivered that afternoon. He had been tracking the armored courier since it left the airport. Downstairs, Maria started her route. She cleaned the kitchen. She wiped down the marble counters in the main living area. She dusted the shelves in the library, careful not to disturb the first editions. Chloe was content in the break room with her fox and a picture book. For an hour, the house was quiet. Just the hum of the central air, the soft swish of Maria's mop, and the distant sound of the city beyond the walls. At 9:27, the doorbell rang, the delivery from Zurich. Vance came down in the private elevator. He greeted the 2 couriers, verified their credentials, and escorted them to the collection room. Maria, who was polishing the banister of the main staircase, saw them pass. She kept her head down. She made herself small. Rule number 4. The vault was opened. The watch, nestled in a velvet-lined case, was presented. Vance inspected it under a magnifying lamp. It was perfect. The transaction was logged. The couriers left. Vance placed the watch in its designated spot inside the climate-controlled vault, next to a Patek Philippe that had once belonged to a prince. He closed the vault door. The heavy magnetic locks engaged with a solid thunk. He heard it. The system beeped, confirming it was secured. The digital log entry read, "Vault secured by A. Vance, 9:52. He went back upstairs. He had a video conference at 10. Maria finished the banister. She checked on Chloe, who was now asleep on the break room couch. She covered her with a sweater and quietly closed the door. She moved to the dining room to wipe down the 12-seat table. It was now 10:17. At 10:43, Vance's conference ended. He decided to go back down. He wanted to look at the watch again. He took the elevator. When the doors opened onto the main floor, he walked toward the collection room. The door was ajar, not open, just not fully closed. His breath caught. He never left it ajar. The mechanism required a firm push to seal. He pushed it open. The interior vault door was open. Not breached, open, as if someone had used the code and the biometric scan. He stepped inside. The air was cool. The lights were on. He walked to the display case for the Cartier. The velvet cushion was empty. The watch was gone. His first call was to his head of security, Marcus Thorne. His second call was to 911. His third call, made while his hands were shaking, was to his lawyer. The police arrived in under 8 minutes. 2 squad cars, then detectives. The house, a place of meticulous order, was suddenly full of strangers, radio static, and urgent, low voices. The questioning began with Vance, then Thorne, then they asked to speak to all staff present. The housekeeper, and they were informed her child. Maria was in the laundry room folding towels when Marcus Thorne found her. His face was grim. "The police need to speak with you, Maria. Now." She felt a cold trickle of fear. She thought of Chloe. "Is this about her being here?" she asked. Thorne didn't answer. "Just come with me." They sat her at the kitchen island. Detective Shaw, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, asked her to walk him through her morning. She did. She stated her times. She mentioned Chloe. She explained the cancelled babysitter. She was honest. She had nothing to hide. Then Shaw asked the question, "Did you enter the collection room today?" "No, sir," she said. "Never. It's against the rules." "Did you see anyone else enter the collection room?" she thought. "I saw Mr. Vance and 2 men in suits go in earlier. After that, no." They asked for her fingerprints for elimination purposes. She agreed. They asked to see the break room. She led them there. Chloe was awake now, sitting quietly on the couch. The sight of police officers made her cling to Maria's leg. One of the officers, a younger woman, smiled at Chloe. "Did you have a fun morning, sweetie?" Chloe buried her face in Maria's jeans. The evidence was mounting, but not in Maria's favor. Her fingerprints were on the banister, the kitchen counter, the door to the break room. They were also, according to the preliminary scan, on the outer frame of the vault door. How she insisted she'd never touched it. Maybe when dusting, but she didn't dust in there. Security did. The security log showed no entry after Vance at 9:52, except the system had a 15-second delay before logging. "A window," Thorne explained to the detectives. "If someone knew the code and the biometric override stored in the system for emergencies and was fast, they could open and close the vault before the log registered a new entry." Who had the emergency override? Vance, Thorne, and the estate manager who was on vacation in Italy. Who had the code? The same 3 people. And who had been in the house unseen during that critical time? The housekeeper and her child. The narrative formed with terrifying speed. Maria Flores, a single mother deep in debt, saw a watch worth more than she could earn in 10 lifetimes. She knew the routines. She'd seen the code entered maybe over a shoulder. She had brought her child as cover as an alibi. She used the 15-second log delay. She took it. She hid it somewhere in the house, maybe in the trash, to retrieve later. It was the only explanation that fit the facts. They arrested her at 2:15 that afternoon. They charged her with grand larceny in the 1st degree. They did not find the watch. They searched her bag, her person, the break room. Nothing. This, they argued, proved she was clever. She had stashed it. They would find it. As they led her out in handcuffs, Chloe screamed, a raw, terrified sound that echoed in the vaulted foyer. Maria turned, her face streaked with tears. "My daughter, you have to call her aunt. The number is in my phone." An officer held Chloe back as Maria was put into the squad car. Vance watched from the top of the staircase. He said nothing. His face was a mask. The news broke by 5 o'clock. Billionaire's prize watch stolen, housekeeper arrested. The story wrote itself. The vulnerable single mother, the temptation, the perfect inside job. Maria was processed, held, and denied bail. The district attorney stood before cameras and called it a classic case of trust betrayed. Maria's court-appointed lawyer, a young public defender named Ben Cruz, saw the evidence, the fingerprints, the access, the motive. It looked hopeless. But Alistair Vance could not sleep. He paced his pen study. The image wouldn't leave him. The little girl in the yellow dress screaming for her mother, the stuffed fox on the floor. He replayed the morning in his head. The watch, the vault, the open door. Something nagged at him, a detail that didn't fit. The vault door had been ajar. If Maria had stolen the watch and fled, would she have carefully, quietly left the outer door slightly open, or would she have run? 3 days after the arrest, he went down to the main floor. The police had finished their forensic search. The house was silent again, but now the silence felt accusatory. He walked to the break room. It was untouched. A child's coloring book was on the table, a small cup with juice residue, and on the couch, the stuffed fox. He picked it up. It was worn, loved, one ear slightly frayed. He held it for a moment, then set it down. As he turned to leave, he saw something. On the floor near the leg of the couch was a piece of plastic, a small, bright red Lego brick. Vance froze. He didn't own Legos. Chloe must have brought it. He bent down and picked it up. And that's when he heard a small sound from the hallway, a whisper of movement. He turned. The estate manager had returned from Italy early. She was standing in the doorway, holding a vacuum cleaner. She looked at the Lego in his hand, then at his face. "Sir, is everything all right?" But Vance wasn't looking at her. He was looking past her into the hallway. His mind was making a connection, a terrifying, illogical leap. The Lego was red. The security footage from the service hallway that morning showed Chloe carrying her fox. Not a Lego. So where did it come from, and when? He thought of the vault's motion sensor, which had a blind spot, a 2-foot-high gap near the floor, designed to ignore the family cat that had died 2 years ago. A space a toddler could crawl under without triggering the alarm. His phone buzzed. It was Detective Shaw. "Mr. Vance, we've finished going through the housekeeper's financials. We found something you need to see. It's a transfer for $5,000 received last month from an unknown source. It looks like a test payment." The evidence against Maria was now airtight, but Vance, holding the red Lego brick, could only think one thing. What if we are all looking in the wrong direction? What if the person who took the watch never meant to steal it at all? Alistair Vance did something the detectives would never approve of. He went to the one person who had been completely ignored, the child. He called Detective Shaw back. "About that transfer," Vance said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'd like to see the details myself." Shaw was hesitant. The case was proceeding. The district attorney was confident. Why rock the boat? But Vance was the victim and a powerful man. An hour later, the records were emailed to him. A $5,000 deposit into Maria Flores's checking account from an entity listed as North Star Holdings, LLC. It was dated September 18th. Vance had never heard of it. He called his own financial analyst. "Find out who owns North Star Holdings," he said, "and do it quietly." Then he called his lawyer, not for legal advice about the theft, but for a different kind of advice. "How do I get permission to visit a suspect in custody?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Alistair, that is a profoundly bad idea. You are the victim, she is the accused. Any contact could taint the case, could be seen as intimidation." "It's not intimidation," Vance said, looking at the red Lego brick on his desk. "It's a conversation." He was denied. The district attorney's office blocked it. So Vance changed tactics. He asked to speak with Maria's lawyer, Ben Cruz. That meeting was allowed. They met in a conference room at the public defender's office, a cramped space that smelled of stale coffee. Ben Cruz was in his late 20s, sharp but worn down. He eyed Vance with suspicion. "If you're here to offer a deal to drop charges if she confesses, save your breath. She's innocent." "I'm not here about a deal," Vance said. "I'm here about a Lego." He placed the red brick on the table between them. Cruz stared at it, then back at Vance, completely baffled. Vance explained, "The security footage, The fox, the motion sensor's blind spot, the door left ajar. Your client didn't take that watch, Vance said, but I think someone did, and I think my employee's daughter might have seen it happen. Cruz leaned back, running a hand over his face. You're saying a 2-year-old is your star witness? I'm saying, Vance replied, that everyone is so focused on the adult with motive and opportunity, they haven't considered the simple, chaotic variable of a toddler in the house. The police asked her nothing. They dismissed her. Because she's 2, Cruz said, frustration edging his voice. Her testimony would be useless in court. It's inadmissible. A defense attorney would tear it apart. How do you know she's not confused? How do you know she didn't imagine it? The jury would never buy it. I'm not talking about a jury yet, Vance said. I'm talking about the truth. Where is Chloe now? With a foster family, Children's Services placed her after Maria's arrest. Her aunt from Florida is trying to get custody, but it takes time. Vance made a decision. I want to see her. That's even more impossible than seeing Maria. Then you see her, Vance insisted. You're her mother's lawyer. You have a reason to ask her about that day. Ask her what she saw. Ask her about the red Lego. Ben Cruz was silent for a long time. He was overworked, under-resourced, and facing a mountain of evidence against his client. This was a distraction, a billionaire's guilt-fueled fantasy, but he also saw the desperate hope in Maria's eyes during their visits, and he had his own nagging doubt about the financial transfer. It was too neat, too obvious. I'll try, he said finally, but I'm not a child psychologist. I don't know how to talk to a 2-year-old about a theft. While Cruz arranged a visit with Chloe in her foster home, Vance's financial analyst called back. North Star Holdings, LLC was a shell company. Its paperwork was a maze, but after tracing through several layers, a name emerged. Not one Vance expected. It was linked to a holding company owned by a former business rival, a man named Julian Croft. Croft had tried to sabotage Vance's company years ago in a bitter patent lawsuit. He had lost. He had also, Vance recalled, an obsession with rare watches. This changed everything. Was Maria a pawn? Had she been set up? The $5,000 transfer was meant to be discovered to create the motive. But how would Croft get her banking details? How would he know her schedule? Vance went back to the security footage from the service entrance, not just from that Tuesday, but from the weeks prior. He watched hours of tape, his eyes aching. He saw Maria arrive always alone. He saw her leave. He saw the delivery people, the landscapers, the occasional visit from the estate manager. And then, on a Friday 2 weeks before the theft, he saw something. A man in a uniform from a reputable HVAC company arriving for a scheduled filter check. The estate manager had let him in. Vance checked the household log. No filter check was scheduled. He froze the frame, zoomed in on the man's face. It was grainy, but it wasn't anyone from the HVAC company Vance used. He called Marcus Thorne, his head of security, who authorized an HVAC visit on September 7th. Thorne sounded confused. I'd have to check the log, sir. Probably the estate manager for routine maintenance. It wasn't routine, Vance said, and it wasn't our company. I want you to pull the full footage of that man's visit, every camera he passed. Thorne's response was delayed. Of course, sir, it might take a day or two to compile. I want it tonight, Vance said and hung up. A new fear was crystallizing. What if the breach wasn't just opportunistic? What if it was an inside job with a different inside man? Meanwhile, Ben Cruz sat on a too-small chair in a brightly colored playroom in a foster home. Chloe was there, wearing a purple shirt that wasn't hers, holding a generic teddy bear. Her fox was back at the Vance estate. She looked smaller than Cruz remembered. A friendly social worker sat nearby. Chloe, this is Mr. Ben. He's a friend. He wants to talk to you about the big house you visited with your mommy. Chloe looked at him, her eyes wide and unsure. Cruz felt utterly out of his depth. He didn't know how to do this. He pointed to a box of toys in the corner. Do you like to build things? Chloe nodded slowly. He walked over, brought the box to the table, and dumped out a pile of Duplo blocks. He started building a simple tower. Chloe watched, then crept closer. She picked up a blue block and added it to his tower. You're a good builder, Cruz said. She didn't respond. They built in silence for a few minutes. He took a deep breath. Chloe, do you remember the big house with the shiny floors? She looked up at the mention of the shiny floors. Mama work, she said softly. Yes, Mama worked there. Do you remember the day you brought Foxy and you were in the little room? She nodded, focusing on snapping a yellow block onto her growing stack. Did you go exploring that day? Did you go for a walk? She shrugged, a tiny childlike gesture, walked. Where did you walk to? Did you see the big shiny door, the one that goes beep? Chloe's hands stilled. She looked past him, her gaze turning inward. She didn't answer. Cruz's heart sank. This was pointless. Then she reached into the toy box and pulled out a small plastic figure, a fireman. She walked the fireman across the table toward the Duplo Tower. Then, in a quiet, sing-song voice, she narrated, "Man open door, beep beep, shiny." Cruz held his breath. A man opened the shiny door. Chloe nodded. She made the fireman figure duck behind a red block. "Hide," she whispered. "Who was hiding? You." She shook her head vigorously. She pointed the fireman at the red block hiding spot. "Man hide." Then she picked up a small plastic dog from the bin. She walked the dog over to the tower, bumping it into the blocks. "Puppy go in, get the tick-tock." She used a word Cruz hadn't expected. Tick-tock, a child's word for a clock or a watch. The puppy went in and got the tick-tock. "Bad puppy," Chloe said firmly and threw the plastic dog on the floor. Then her face clouded. She looked around the room as if searching for something. "My Foxy?" she asked, her lip trembling. The social worker stepped in, seeing the distress. "I think that's enough for today, Mr. Cruz." He left, his mind reeling. A man opened the door, a man hid. A puppy went in and got the tick-tock. It was fragmented, metaphorical, the logic of a 2-year-old, but it was a story, and it did not match the story of Maria Flores sneaking into the vault. He called Vance from his car. She said a man opened the door. She said a puppy took the tick-tock. She said the man was hiding. Vance, sitting in his dark study, felt a chill. Did she describe the man? No, she used a toy fireman. It could be anyone. But Vance, she didn't mention her mother at all. That night, Marcus Thorne did not send the compiled footage. Vance called him at 8, no answer. He called again at 9. At 10, he drove to the security office, a separate building on the estate grounds. It was dark. Thorne's car was gone. Using his master key, Vance let himself in. The monitoring station was empty. He went to the server rack and found the digital storage drive for the camera system. The drive for the month of September was missing. He stood in the dark room, the hum of the servers the only sound. Marcus Thorne, his head of security for 5 years, the man who had first pointed the finger at Maria, was gone, and he had taken the evidence with him. The inside man had just revealed himself. But why for a watch? Thorne had a good salary, but $10 million was a life-changing temptation. Was he working for Julian Croft? The pieces were there, but they didn't quite lock. The setup of Maria was too elaborate, too personal. This felt like more than just theft. It felt like revenge. Vance called Detective Shaw immediately. "My head of security, Marcus Thorne, is missing. He has removed critical security footage. I believe he was involved in the theft and framed Maria Flores." The detective's sigh was audible, weary. "Mr. Vance, with all due respect, we have a solid case against Flores. Her prints, her access, her financials. Now you're accusing your own security chief. Based on what? A missing hard drive and a toddler story about a fireman." "Yes," Vance said, his voice tight. "Based on that." "We'll look into Thorne's whereabouts," Shaw said, his tone making it clear it was a low priority. "But it doesn't exonerate your housekeeper. Thorne had access too. Maybe they were in it together." Vance realized he was hitting a wall. The system had its suspect. It was not designed for doubt. He needed physical proof. He needed the watch. He thought of Chloe's story. The puppy took the tick-tock. Where would a puppy hide a shiny tick-tock? Not in the house. The police had searched every inch, but a puppy goes outside. At 3 in the morning, armed with a powerful flashlight, Alistair Vance went into his own garden. He hadn't been out there in years. It was overgrown, a testament to his neglect. He walked the paths, shining the light into bushes, under benches, around the fountain. He felt like a fool. What was he looking for? A watch buried in the dirt. Then, near the old oak tree at the back of the property, he saw it. The soil was disturbed, not by an animal, but by a tool, a small, recent digging. He got on his knees, ignoring the damp earth soaking through his trousers. He dug with his hands. His fingers hit metal, not a watch, a small, waterproof case. He pulled it out, covered in dirt. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pried it open. Inside, wrapped in a soft cloth, was the Cartier watch. It glittered in the beam of his flashlight, perfect and unharmed. But next to it was something else, a USB drive. Vance took it all back to his study. He wiped the dirt off the drive and plugged it into his computer. A single video file appeared. He clicked play. The footage was from a hidden camera pointed at the vault door. The timestamp read October 10th, 9:58 in the morning. He saw himself leave the vault, the door sealing behind him. The frame was empty for 30 seconds. Then Marcus Thorne entered the frame. He used a keycard and a code on the panel. The vault door clicked open. He didn't go in. Instead, he wedged the door ever so slightly with a folded piece of paper, preventing it from fully sealing. He left the frame. 2 minutes later, a different man entered. Younger, wearing a maintenance uniform, he slipped inside the vault, emerged less than a minute later, pocketing the watch. He then removed the paper wedge and closed the vault door properly. He looked directly at the hidden camera for a split second and smiled. It was the same man from the fake HVAC visit. But the video wasn't over. The timestamp jumped. It was now later that same day, after the police had left. Thorne re-entered the frame. He went to the vault door and with a gloved hand, pressed it in several places, planting Maria's fingerprints, transferred from a glass or a tool he had taken from her cleaning cart. It was all there, the entire frame-up recorded by Thorne himself, an insurance policy or a confession. Vance played the last few seconds. Thorne looked into the hidden lens, his face grim. "If you're seeing this, you found my insurance. Croft wanted the watch. I wanted you to suffer. You took everything from me, Vance, my company, my reputation. You don't even remember, do you? You ruined me and then you hired me out of pity. So I helped Croft take your precious watch. And I made sure the woman who cleans your floors paid the price. I hope it eats you alive." The screen went black. Alistair Vance sat in the silence, the watch cold in his hand. He didn't remember ruining Marcus Thorne. There had been so many business battles, so many competitors left in the wake of his success. Thorne must have been one of them. This wasn't a theft. It was a targeted, vindictive strike, and Maria and Chloe were the collateral damage. He had the proof. He could clear Maria's name tonight. But as he reached for the phone to call Detective Shaw, a new, more horrifying thought occurred to him. Marcus Thorne was gone. Julian Croft had the watch's buyer, presumably, but the video proved Thorne's involvement, not Croft's. The shell company trail was cold. Croft was insulated, and Thorne's confession only detailed the act of theft and framing. It said nothing about the $5,000 transfer to Maria's account. That was a separate piece of the puzzle, one that could still tether her to the crime in the eyes of the law. If Vance went to the police now, Maria might still go down. They could argue she was Thorne's accomplice, that the transfer was her payment. The video didn't exonerate her, it just introduced a new accomplice. The district attorney, eager for a conviction, would spin it that way. To truly free Maria Flores, Alistair Vance needed one more thing. He needed to make Julian Croft confess. But Julian Croft wasn't just a rival collector. He was a man who believed Vance had stolen his life's work, and he had been planning this moment for 3 years. Vance remembered the lawsuit now, not a patent battle but a buyout. 7 years ago, Croft had founded a startup called Ether Analytics. It was brilliant, revolutionary, and it was floundering. Croft came to Vance for funding. Vance saw the potential, but he made an offer Croft couldn't accept: sell the company outright, walk away, and take a consulting role. Croft refused. He called Vance a vulture. 6 months later, with Ether Analytics weeks from bankruptcy, Vance's company launched a nearly identical product. Croft sued for intellectual property theft. The case dragged on for 2 years before being settled out of court for a fraction of what Croft had sought. The non-disclosure agreement was ironclad. Croft vanished from the industry. Now he was back, and he wasn't just after a watch, he was after ruin. Vance couldn't go to the police with just the video. As he'd feared, They would see it as Thorne acting alone or with Maria. He needed Croft's voice on tape admitting the frame-up. He needed the mastermind. He called Ben Cruz at dawn. "I have the watch. I have a video of Thorne planting evidence and confessing to working with Croft." Cruz, who had been up all night preparing a bail motion, was stunned. "Where?" "Buried in my garden. Thorne left it there with a USB drive. A confession, but it only implicates himself. He says Croft wanted the watch, but he wanted me to suffer." "This changes everything," Cruz said, hope surging in his voice. "It changes nothing for Maria," Vance corrected, his tone grim. "Without Croft, the DA will argue Maria was Thorne's accomplice. The $5,000 transfer is still unexplained. We need Croft." "How? You think he'll just confess to you over tea?" "No," Vance said. "I think he'll confess to a reporter." Vance had an idea, a dangerous, legally precarious idea. He would leak a story to a trusted tech journalist, one who had covered the Ether Analytics lawsuit. The story would claim that Vance, devastated by the wrongful accusation of his housekeeper, was offering a $10 million reward for information leading to the recovery of the watch and the conviction of the real thief. The hook, sources close to the investigation believed the thief was a rival collector and that the watch was already on the black market in Europe. The goal was to flush Croft out. If Croft thought the watch was lost, that his perfect crime was unraveling, he might make a move. He might try to contact Thorne, or he might try to gloat. Vance made the call. The story ran at noon the next day. It was picked up by every major outlet. The narrative began to subtly shift. Billionaire doubts case against Housekeeper. The district attorney's office issued a terse statement. "The evidence remains solid. We are confident in our case." That evening, Vance's private cell phone rang. A blocked number, he answered. "Alastair," the voice was smooth, cultured, "Julian Croft. I read the news, offering a reward. That's very public-spirited of you." Vance's hand tightened on the phone. "What do you want, Julian?" "To congratulate you. It seems you've developed a conscience. Pity it's 2 years too late for that woman and her child." There was a smile in his voice. "You set her up." "I have no idea what you're talking about. I heard about your unfortunate theft and the arrest. Tragic how these people we invite into our homes betray us." "Thorne is missing," Vance said, baiting the hook. "The police are looking for him. When they find him, he'll talk." Croft laughed, a soft, dry sound. "Marcus Thorne is on a beach in Belize by now, living under new name, paid from an untraceable account. He won't be found. And even if he is, he has nothing to say about me. Our communications were ephemeral." "The watch is evidence." "Is it the watch you claim to have lost? The watch that, according to your own reward offer, is somewhere in Europe? You're telling stories, Alastair. You always were good at that. Telling stories to investors, to juries." Croft was enjoying this. Every word was a needle. Vance pushed forward. "Why her? Why Maria Flores?" The line was silent for a moment. When Croft spoke again, the playful tone was gone, replaced by something cold and sharp. "You look at people like her and you see furniture. Quiet, useful, disposable. You look at people like me and you see obstacles to be removed. I wanted you to see what it feels like to destroy something innocent, to have it on your hands. I wanted you to lie awake knowing that woman is in a cell and her daughter is in foster care because of your past, because of what you did to me. The watch was just the mechanism." He hung up. Vance had recorded the call. He played it back. It was damning, but was it enough? Croft had never explicitly admitted to the theft. He spoke in metaphors, in taunts. A good defense attorney would call it the bitter rant of a former rival, not a confession. He sent the audio to Ben Cruz. "It's something," Cruz said, "but it's not a smoking gun. We need the money trail. We need to prove Croft orchestrated the transfer to Maria's account." While Cruz worked with a forensic accountant to chase the shell companies, Vance turned his attention to the one piece of the puzzle no one could explain. How did Croft get Maria's banking information to make that transfer? He requested the full personnel file from the estate manager. Maria's file was thin, application, ID copies, tax forms, and a voided check for direct deposit. The check had been scanned and uploaded to the household's cloud server 2 years ago when she was hired. Who had access to that server? Vance, the estate manager, the accountant, and Marcus Thorne as head of security. Thorne had everything he needed: the check image, the account number. He could have passed it to Croft, but that still felt indirect. Croft was a hands-on plotter. He would want assurance. Vance had a chilling thought. What if Croft had gotten it himself? He reviewed the visitor logs for the estate, not just for the month of the theft, but for the entire year. He looked for any connection, a name he recognized, a company, nothing. Frustrated, he did something he should have done days earlier. He drove to Maria's apartment building. He needed to see her world. The superintendent, after a $200 tip, let him into her vacant unit. It was small, clean, sparsely furnished. The silence was oppressive. On the fridge, held by a magnet, was a child's drawing of 2 stick figures and a bigger figure with a smile. "Mama, me, and Mr. Al," it was labeled in Maria's handwriting. Vance felt a physical ache in his chest. Mr. Al, she must have talked about him to Chloe. He was about to leave when he saw it on the small desk. A pile of mail, forwarded by the super, mostly bills, and a glossy brochure for a luxury preschool called Little Explorers Academy. It was open on the page showing tuition, $24,000 a year, stamped on the front in red ink, "Open house attendee September 12." Maria had gone to an open house for a school she could never afford. Why? Vance took a picture of the brochure. He called the school from his car. He posed as a potential donor, asking if a Maria Flores had attended their open house. The administrator, eager to impress, confirmed it. Yes, she was here. Such a lovely woman. Her daughter, Chloe, is exactly the kind of student we look for. Was she alone? Vance asked. Oh no, she came with her partner, I believe, a very supportive gentleman. He asked a lot of questions about our scholarship program. Vance's blood ran cold. Do you remember his name? I'm afraid I don't, but he was quite distinctive, elegant, wore beautiful Italian loafers. I remember because he complimented our floor polish and said it reminded him of his own. Italian loafers, Croft. Croft hadn't just targeted Maria from afar, he had met her. He had inserted himself into her life. He had posed as her partner. The pieces slammed together. The open house was on September 12th. The $5,000 scholarship deposit hit Maria's account on September 18th. It wasn't a random transfer. It was a promise. A down payment on a future he never intended to give her, designed to be discovered. Croft had studied her, learned her deepest wish for her daughter, and used it as the lever to destroy her. Vance raced back to his car. He called Cruz. I know how he did it. He met her. He posed as a benefactor. The money was for a school. It was a setup from the beginning. We have to go to the police with this, Cruz said. The school administrator can id him. It proves he was in contact with her, that he set up the financial motive. It proves contact, not theft, Vance said, but his mind was racing. He had the audio. He had the school ID. He had the video from Thorne. It was a mosaic, but maybe it was enough to create reasonable doubt. Maybe it was enough to get Maria out. They decided to go to Detective Shaw together with everything. But when they arrived at the precinct, Shaw wasn't there. He had been reassigned. The case had been transferred to the district attorney's financial crimes unit. It was now being handled by a prosecutor named Angela Rossi, known for her aggressive convictions and her close relationship with the media. They were granted a meeting with Rossi. She listened, stone-faced, as Vance laid out the evidence, the video, the audio, the school brochure. When he finished, she steepled her fingers. Mr. Vance, you've been through a trauma. You're looking for a complex conspiracy because the simple truth is too painful. A woman you trusted betrayed you. She didn't, Cruz interjected. This evidence shows. It shows, Rossi cut in, that you have a video of your disgruntled employee Marcus Thorne committing a crime and mentioning a man named Croft. It shows an audio recording of a bitter man saying unpleasant things to you, and it shows that your housekeeper visited a school. None of this exonerates Maria Flores. In fact, it could be argued it strengthens our case. She was in contact with a known rival of yours. Perhaps she was working for him all along. The $5,000 was her first payment. Thorne was the middleman. The fact that the watch was found on your property suggests she hid it there, perhaps on Thorne's instruction to retrieve later. The case stands. Vance felt the walls closing in. The system had a logic, and it was immune to doubt. "You have a toddler's testimony," he said, desperate. Rossi almost smiled. A toddler who pointed at a toy fireman and said, "Bad puppy." "That's not testimony, Mr. Vance. That's a child playing. The Children's Services report indicates she is confused and traumatized. We will not be re-traumatizing that child for your theory." They were dismissed. In the hallway, Cruz leaned against the wall, defeated. "She's not going to drop the charges. The trial date is in 6 weeks. We'll present this at trial, try to create reasonable doubt." 6 weeks is a lifetime in jail, Vance said quietly. "And what happens when she's convicted? She loses Chloe forever." He drove back to his empty fortress. He had all the pieces, but he couldn't force them into the picture the law required. He was a billionaire who could move markets, but he couldn't bend this single, rigid line of justice. That night he did the only thing he had left. He wrote a letter to Maria Flores. He told her everything he had found. He apologized. He told her about the drawing on his fridge. He promised her, in writing, that he would not stop. He had his driver deliver it to the jail. The next morning he received a visitor. It was the estate manager. She looked nervous. "Sir, I remembered something about the day of the fake HVAC visit. When the man left, he didn't have his toolbox. He said he'd forgotten it and would come back. He never did. I meant to tell security, but with everything, I just found it in the back of the supply closet." She handed him a small, durable plastic toolbox. Vance opened it. It wasn't full of tools. It was a compact spy kit, a frequency scanner, lock picks, and a small high-resolution camera. And at the very bottom, wrapped in foam, a single item, a glass with a faint lipstick mark. Maria's water glass from the break room, the source of her fingerprints. This was the final piece, the literal toolbox of the frame-up. It had Croft's fingerprints all over it, not literally, but in its meticulous, over-engineered design. But as Vance held the box, he knew it didn't matter. Rossi would say Maria could have planted it, or Thorne. The doubt would always favor the simpler story. The poor woman stole the rich man's watch. He was sitting in his study, the toolbox on his desk, watching the sunset, when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Chloe, sitting on the floor of her foster playroom, crying. The text below read, "The system protects its own. She will be adopted by a lovely family upstate. You will never see her again. This is the cost of crossing me. JC." The ground fell out from under him. Croft wasn't finished. He had connections. He was pulling strings within the foster system. He was going to take Chloe away permanently to complete Maria's destruction. Vance's paralysis shattered. The law had failed. The evidence had failed. There was only one move left. He had to get Chloe out of the system, and to do that, he needed her mother free, not in 6 weeks, now. He picked up the phone and called the one person who operated outside the system, a former Special Forces contractor he'd used for corporate security in volatile countries. "I need a plane," Vance said, "and I need you to find a man named Julian Croft. I don't care where he is. I want him in a room with me in 24 hours. It was no longer about justice. It was a rescue mission. And it was about to become a kidnapping. The private jet touched down in the Hamptons at 4 in the morning. Julian Croft was there, in a $12 million summer home, believing he had won. Vance's contractor, a man named Eli, had located him in under 6 hours. Croft had become complacent. He was hosting a small dinner party that night, boasting about a new acquisition. He never saw the 2 men who entered his home through the garden, disabled his rudimentary security system, and waited in his study. When Croft walked in after his guests left, expecting to pour himself a nightcap, he found Alistair Vance sitting in his favorite armchair. The Cartier watch was on the table between them, next to the spy toolbox. For a moment, Croft was too stunned to speak. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Alistair, this is a surprise. Breaking and entering, that's beneath you." "We are past legalities," Vance said, his voice flat. "You're going to confess. You're going to detail every step of how you framed Maria Flores, and then you're going to call your contact in the Child Services Department and reverse the adoption order for Chloe." Croft laughed, pouring himself a drink. "Or what? You'll kill me. You don't have the stomach for it." "I won't have to," Vance said. He nodded to Eli, who stood in the shadows. Eli placed a digital recorder on the table, then a tablet. He tapped the screen and a live video feed appeared. It showed Croft's sister's house in Connecticut. His niece, a college student, was walking up the front path. "You hurt Maria's child. I will dismantle your entire world piece by piece, starting with the people you love. I will ruin you so completely that your name will be a joke. I have the resources, and I have nothing left to lose." The color drained from Croft's face. The smugness vanished. "You're bluffing." Vance picked up the tablet. "Call your sister. Ask her if the police just left. Ask her about the IRS audit that just opened on her husband's business. That was in the last 20 minutes. Imagine the next 24 hours. Croft stared at the live feed, then at Vance's eyes. He saw no bluff. He saw a man who had been pushed to a precipice and had decided to fly. He slowly set his glass down. "What do you want?" "A full confession. Now, for the record. Then a call to your friend at social services. Then you will walk into the district attorney's office with me and repeat it. And if I do, you go to prison for theft, conspiracy, and fraud. Not for kidnapping, not for attempted child trafficking. Your family remains untouched." Croft was silent for a full minute, weighing his non-existent options. He had played a game of shadows and reputation. Vance had just changed the game to one of raw, unprotected force. He slumped into the chair opposite Vance. "Start the recorder." For the next hour, Julian Croft spoke. He detailed how he had approached Marcus Thorne over a year ago, exploiting Thorne's seething resentment. He explained how they had planned the theft for months, choosing the Cartier because of its symbolic value, a trophy Vance had openly coveted. He described the fake HVAC visit to case the house, to clone security codes. Admitted to meeting Maria at the school open house, posing as a philanthropist named Julian Carter, offering a scholarship grant that required her bank details for the deposit. He confirmed the $5,000 transfer was a setup, a piece of fabricated motive. He outlined how Thorne had planted the fingerprints and left the vault door ajar. He even revealed that Thorne was, at that moment, not in Belize, but hiding in a cabin in upstate New York, waiting for his final payment. It was a complete, unvarnished confession. When he finished, Vance made him call the social services administrator who was fast-tracking Chloe's adoption. Croft, using a different, more threatening tone, informed the man that there had been a mistake, that the mother was being exonerated, and that any further action would result in a lawsuit and a leak to the press about the administrator's own shady past dealings. The call was recorded. By sunrise, they were in a black SUV heading back to the city. Vance called Ben Cruz. "I have Croft. He's confessed. We're coming to your office. Call the district attorney. Call the press." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Vance's lawyers presented the recordings to the district attorney. Faced with an undeniable, detailed confession and the threat of a massive wrongful arrest lawsuit, the DA had no choice. The charges against Maria Flores were dropped. She was released at 9 p.m. on a Thursday, walking out of the courthouse into a scrum of cameras, clutching Ben Cruz's arm, her eyes searching desperately for Chloe. Vance had arranged it. He'd used his influence to have Chloe brought from foster care directly to his estate. He waited with her in the garden, by the stone bench. Chloe held her stuffed fox, confused but calm in the familiar, if grand, surroundings. When Maria's car came up the drive, she stumbled out before it fully stopped. She ran across the gravel, her shoes crunching, her arms outstretched. "Chloe." Chloe turned, her face breaking into a sunbeam of a smile. "Mama," she ran, her little legs pumping, and crashed into her mother's embrace. Maria sank to her knees, sobbing, kissing her daughter's hair, her face, her hands, as if checking she was real. They held each other for a long time, the morning sun warming them. Vance stood a respectful distance away, watching. He felt like an intruder on a sacred moment. When Maria finally looked up, her eyes met his. They were filled with tears, but also with a question. He walked over slowly. "Maria, I am so sorry for everything." She stood, holding Chloe on her hip. She studied his face, looking for the man who had ignored her for years, the man whose home had become her prison. She saw only exhaustion and regret. "You believed her," she said softly. "When no one else did, you believed my daughter." "It was the only thing that made sense," he said. Marcus Thorne was arrested that afternoon at the cabin. He rolled over on Croft immediately, corroborating the entire story in exchange for a slightly lesser sentence. Julian Croft was charged with grand larceny, conspiracy, fraud, and witness intimidation. His fall from grace was swift and total. The tech blogs ran stories with headlines like, "From Founder to Felon." The story dominated the news for a week. The narrative flipped from Housekeeper steals Billionaire's watch to Billionaire rescues Housekeeper from elaborate frame-up. Vance hated the headlines. He knew he was no hero. He had been blind, then reckless. He had broken the law to force a confession. He had threatened an innocent family. The ends had justified the means, but the means sat heavily on him. A week after her release, Maria returned to the estate, not to clean. Vance had asked to see her. They sat in the garden at the stone bench. Chloe played nearby with Rabbit in the grass. "I can't work for you anymore," Maria said, not unkindly. "It's not, I can't be here." "I understand," Vance said. "I don't expect you to. I've set up a trust for Chloe, for her education, for whatever she needs. It's the least I can do." Maria shook her head. "I don't want your money, Mr. Vance." "It's not charity," he said. "It's restitution, and it's in a trust. You can't refuse it, it's for her." He paused. "I also sold the watch." Maria looked up, surprised. "The Cartier, I sold it at auction. The proceeds, along with a matching sum from me, are being used to start a legal defense fund for domestic workers wrongfully accused of crimes. It's called the Chloe Fund." Maria's eyes filled with tears again. She looked at her daughter, laughing as she chased a butterfly. She nodded, unable to speak. "There's one more thing," Vance said. "My company is starting an on-site daycare center for employees and for the staff at my properties. I need a director, someone who understands what families need. The salary is significant. The hours are your own. I thought you might know someone." Maria stared at him. He was offering her a job, a real career, not cleaning his floors, a way to support her daughter with dignity. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the desire to do more than write a check. "I'll think about it," she said, and for the first time she smiled at him, a real, tentative smile. The following month, Alistair Vance appeared before a congressional subcommittee on justice reform, sharing his story not as a billionaire, but as a man who had seen the system fail the most vulnerable. He advocated for reforms in how child witnesses are interviewed and for stronger protections for domestic workers. He did not mention how he'd obtained the confession. Maria Flores became the director of the Vance Enterprises Family Center. She hired other mothers, designed a curriculum based on play and kindness, and ensured no parent ever had to choose between a paycheck and their child's safety. Chloe thrived there. The two families did not become one. They orbited each other, connected by a shared trauma and a profound debt. Vance would sometimes visit the daycare, not as a boss, but as a guest reader. Chloe would run up to him and call him Al, just like her mother had taught her. He would get down on one knee, and she would tell him long, elaborate stories about Rabbit and the dragon. He always listened. One afternoon, a year later, Maria found Vance in the garden. He was sitting on the bench, looking at the plaque. She sat beside him. "You know," she said quietly, "for a long time, I thought you were the dragon in Chloe's stories, the big, scary thing in the castle." "And now?" he asked. "Now I think you were just the man in the castle, and the dragon was out there all along." She paused. "We're moving to an apartment near the center. It has a bigger balcony." "That's wonderful," Vance said, and he meant it. "Chloe wants you to come to her birthday party. It's at the park. She's very specific. She says you have to bring the chocolate cake." Vance laughed, a real, unguarded sound that surprised them both. "I will be there." As Maria walked back to the center, Vance stayed on the bench. He realized the silence in the house was gone. It had been replaced by the distant, joyful noise of children playing. He had set out to recover a stolen object, but he had somehow recovered something else, a sense of connection, a purpose beyond his own walls. The story made the news one last time, a small piece in the business section, venture capitalist turns philanthropist, citing personal reckoning. It didn't mention Maria or Chloe by name. It didn't mention the watch or the theft, and that was how they all preferred it. The final surprise came from an unexpected place. Julian Croft, from prison, sent a letter to Vance. It contained no apology. Instead, it contained a single line: "You should check the provenance of the Patek Philippe you bought in 2017. I hear it has a fascinating history." Vance had the watch authenticated. It was a fake, a brilliant, near-perfect forgery he had paid $3 million for. Croft had sold it to him through a shell company years ago, long before their feud. The theft of the Cartier had been his second scam against Vance. The first had been the forgery. Croft had been playing a long, patient game, and he had won that round, even from a cell. Vance didn't sell the forgery. He put it in a display case in his study with a new plaque that read, "The Cost of Arrogance." It reminded him that the people we overlook often see the clearest. And in a playroom full of light and laughter, a little girl with a stuffed fox pointed to a picture on the wall, a drawing of a man, a woman, and a child holding hands. "That's my friend Al," she told a new boy. "He found my mommy when she was lost." The story didn't end with a bow. Real ones never do. But in that city, in that year, with a child safe in her mother's arms and a man no longer sitting alone by a window, it felt, finally, like something had been set right. And that is where we will leave them. So what is the lesson in a story like this? It's not that billionaires can be heroes or that the system is always wrong. It's that truth has a funny way of hiding in plain sight, in the places we've been trained not to look. We are conditioned to follow the obvious path, the fingerprints, the motive, the convenient suspect. We build cases on logic and forget that reality is often illogical, interrupted by the unpredictable humanity of a child or a moment of stubborn doubt. Maria Flores was the perfect suspect because she fit a narrative we all recognize. The struggle, the need, the access. It was a story that made sense on paper, but reality is not lived on paper. It's lived in the quiet moments a camera doesn't see, a toddler wandering a hallway, a man kneeling on a garden path, a mother's silent terror. The real crime wasn't the theft of a watch. It was the theft of a person's life, the willing destruction of her future, simply because she was the easiest target. This story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Who do we instinctively blame when something goes wrong? Who do we refuse to hear? How many other Marias are trapped in cells, their children waiting in foster homes, because the narrative was just a little too tidy, because no one with power stopped to question it? The Chloe Fund exists because of one case that was overturned. But for everyone that is, there are dozens that never make the news, where the doubt never comes, where the billionaire never gets involved. If this story moved you, if it made you think of the times you were judged unfairly or the times you might have judged too quickly, then this channel is for you. We don't chase sensational headlines here. We sit with the human stories that live in the margins, the quiet battles for dignity, the moments where a single act of seeing someone, truly seeing them, changes everything. The bandage with cartoon stars, the drawing of two circles, the small hand that points not to accuse, but to reveal. These are the stories that remind us who we are. They are the antidote to a world that often feels cold and transactional. They are worth staying for. So if you believe in stories like this, please subscribe. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that people can surprise you, that the truth is often stranger and more beautiful than the lie. And in the comments, tell us about a time someone saw you when you felt invisible, or a time you chose to look closer when everything told you to look away. We read every single one. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. There are so many more stories to tell, and we'll be here to tell them. Until next time.